are local.
The international community is observing every
Just finished taking
When the main market is in chaos, people are
We are national.
Those in support of this motion as amended, say aye.
We have taken the vote by default.
We are international.
Israeli airstrikes.
Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment.
Signature TV, news in your pocket.
Right, so welcome back to Signature Evening. We'll go straight to the quote for the day. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. This is coming from Nelson Mandela. The Honorable Minister of Education, Dr. Tunji Alausa, has reaffirmed the federal government's commitment to transitioning all national public examinations, specifically the West African Examinations Council (Waec), the National Examinations Council (Neco), from the traditional paper pencil test to full computer-based testing, that's CBT, by 2026. Dr. Lausa made this announcement on Tuesday, July 22nd, 2025, during a monitoring visit to the pilot phase of Neco's CBT-based Senior School Certificate Examination at SASCON International School, Maitama, Abuja. Now, some school of thought believe that the initiative signals a significant milestone in the education sector, the reform agenda under the leadership of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, while others are of the opinion that it would be a failed project on arrival based on Nigeria precedent in the education sector. And this is a very constructive conversation, complicating conversation, crucial conversation that we shall be talking about. And we won't be doing this alone. We've got our guest on standby that will be discussing this. But before we get to our guest, Quinsley,
sir.
if you were to, find yourself in the ages of these people taking Waec and Neco right now,
And it's
CBT, do you think it's what you would say through?
With the things, with how things are in Nigeria, you know how sick it can get. It's not so smooth, especially for the first time. You have to try over and over again. So I possibly would be part of the first, like the fifth group, but definitely not the first, second, and third.
You're like the type in exams, during exams, not these GS classes that you avoid the first, second batch of people coming in. So you see, you ask, how was it? You learn from them.
Exactly. So I wouldn't want to do, because imagine going to write Waec and Neco again the second time. You know that result, that rather the exam is really draining. So you can't have people
scared of technical glitches and what have you. But then again, we'll have our guest discussing this with us, Ephraim Okenwa. Good evening and welcome to the program.
Mr. Ephraim,
Thank you so much. Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for joining us. Ephraim is an educationist and entrepreneur. We shall be discussing the topic Waec goes CBT, and this is what is trending right now, although this is to kick off 2026. But let's get your thoughts. Generally, do you think this is commendable, or do you think this is just, I wish I could say a paper talk? Is this like a political statement, if I'm to use that phrase?
Okay, so basically, I really think that the way we go about policies makes it a little bit difficult for the policy to succeed eventually. Yeah, because in design thinking, you don't just sit under the comfort of your office and maybe come up with a solution that you think it's going to work and then implement that without actually looking at or gauging the current state of education, how equipped, the nature of the exams you're running, and then also like trying to like borrow leave from like JAMB examination, which has been long based on CBT test, which we know that everything entirely is on, multi-choice questions. But then when you talk about like an examination with more numbers, right? And then typically to be written in school centers, right? And then if you now want to like have an examination that's still going to incorporate practicals, theory, and then all of the test objectives for the different papers, and you are thinking of coming up with a CBT, it may actually be like, while addressing one problem, you are trying to create another. And more so, I do not think that with the way things are at the moment, that perhaps the educational sector is ready to fully operationalize the CBT test, even judging from the way that JAMB has had it back and forth. And so when we now begin to have, like, even from this recently released examination, where they couldn't even manage properly their database for the students, now blaming the same technical glitch. What about when you now fully operationalize, including the testing process? And that means you have more headaches to actually deal with.
All right then, Mr. Ephraim, let's look at the roots where this is coming from. Where exactly is the reason for transitioning from the paper-based test to the computer-based test?
Okay, so Waec says the reason, of course, is to curb examination malpractice. But we know that examination malpractice is multifaceted and hydra-headed. And interestingly, the target people that this is designed for, which is students, may not really be the principal reason why exam malpractice has been endemic in Nigeria's education. I think principally is to first, acknowledge the fact that in recent years, Waec examinations, even before assessment, gets to leak out to the public, and people begin to like distribute solve past questions. Like we know that in the last examination, Waec English was cancelled, and it was all over the news, where students was late into the night using phones, trying to like see what they were writing. I mean, that was quite unexpected. I mean, it's not a commendable one, because what would have been reasonably expected from Waec is to cancel that, right? And then fix a new date so that they can plan well, rather than a situation where like 11 p.m. some students were still writing, and even some centers 1 a.m. And that largely even impacted on the English language of this year, from the results that we were able to look at nationally, based on the report from Waec, shows that the performance in English and mathematics was not good. But I think relatively, particularly for English, compared with last year and the challenges that students face this year, I think that challenge, of course, is a factor. And so when Waec has done some level of introspection within to stop leakage of papers, and then those of them that are also supervising the paper, if the supervisor says that he's not going to let students to cheat in the hall, the students will be counting the ceiling, right? There's certainly nothing you are going to do, but oftentimes we leave aside the supervision, leave aside the exam administration, and then now begin to focus on the end users, which by design should actually have the exam being coordinated in such a manner that there are no gaps, for them to explore.
All right. Thank you, Ephraim. Now, in as much as many Nigerians are commending this very project that Waec and Neco, they're looking at commencing next year, some Nigerians are also thinking, just like the current administration, Bola Ahmed Tinubu mentioned that subsidy is gone. And all of a sudden, things turned upside down for Nigerians. Many people have the opinion that even if you want to come up with something like this, there are still thousands of Nigerian students that are yet to be acquainted with the computer process, right? Why not say this, that in 3 years' time, in 2 years' time, in 4 years' time, this is going to commence. So you use that period to start to train and let people know that if you're coming for this exam from this time to this time, you should get acquainted with the system. So for those that were not, will start training. It should even be a must in schools, their curriculums, to put these students through, have a practical experience right from their classroom. So when they finally get to the point of the exams, it won't be a challenge for them. But with this sudden announcement coming next year, and next year is also it's already around the corner, are you seeing this playing out like subsidy in the educational sector?
Well, as reasonably expected, anytime certain policies are made without critical evaluation, without listening, because in developing a product that will serve its purpose, in entrepreneurship, there's what we call design thinking, which proposes that design thinking should not be an afterthought. Maybe something you begin to get back to the drawing table when there are challenges arising from poor planning, like we saw in the management of the subsidy. But that right from the time where you begin to move from the ideation phase to developing a prototype to now having a model that is sustainable, that is replicable, that is transferable, you must have really done all of your due diligence to ensure that there are no gaps. Like you pointed out, I'm sure the policymakers will not even be as generous as considering that these people we are designing this so-called solution for, many of them do not even have access to computer. So how are we going to carry them along? Our leaders, policymakers, do not get to that level of appreciating the reality that is on ground. Perhaps one of them may have gone to UK, and after eating burger and taking coffee, he comes and with a recommendation and report and says to enhance educational outcomes, there is need, to move our assessment process from analog to digital. And then people will start clapping and say, how? By moving our analog assessment to digital through the CBT, people will clap again. And the next thing, they are now thinking of how to assess budget and enrich some cronies. And then at the end of the day, it is said that, well, it's just all about the students. And over time, while exam has not always worked in Nigerian system, I think we have a wrong focus as a people. Focusing on the products above the process, certificates above certification, end above the means, right? In Nigeria, it is said that it is the end that justifies the means. It's actually the means that should justify the end. I wish we can begin to lay more emphasis on the process, on the process, on the process. So when it comes to examination, everybody, wants to get to the field, what is happening, what is happening. But during normal times, nobody want to check, are teachers teaching the right thing? Are they following the curriculum? Are they keeping up to date with the diaries? That is where real outcomes happen. And any nation that wants to get it right must go beyond cognitive regurgitation of information to actually ensuring that there is proper experience, because these are those that is going to man your health sector, man your digital sector, man the business sector, man governance and civil sector. And if they are not properly tutored, then they ain't gonna offer anything to the system.
All right, Mr. Ephraim, we have people in the underdeveloped areas, people that stay in the rural areas, people that don't have access to computers and even the internet. How are they supposed to participate in this examination since it's now a computer-based test?
Well, I'm sure that this is left for the policymakers and Waec, because You know, there is this culture of assumption, right? We have as a people. When we talk about research and development, which is a very integral component of thriving societies, you know what research means? Research is meant to produce data, and data is seen as raw information, raw knowledge, and not to work on an assumption of where we think that maybe if we start this, maybe people can move to the next CBT centers in the neighboring states. And just by making some of those careless statements without actually going into the field to evaluate what is going to be the impact of this policy, supposing we have students that stays in Chibok, for instance, and the closest CBT center to them is maybe like 100 kilometers away, right? And they'll have to go with public transport, and the examination, like we saw in the case of JAM, fixing an examination for children as early as 6:30. Even in far north, where there were insecurity challenges. And that tells you that some of these guys are not thinking, because the first thing that anybody that is designing solution for minors should factor in would be the security of these minors, the security of these future leaders. But for many of them, they could just come up and say, exam starts 6:30, and guess what? Will you leave your house by 6:30? The answer is no. Therefore, you are advised to leave your house by 5. What happens to that 16-year-old girl who would have to, like, you know, go through the bushes or through some narrow paths before it gets into public transport? What about if it's one chance style that you have, like in some Nigerian cities that, you know, have some great deal of security vitality? So I think that one of the things that is missing in our policies would be design thinking, which I insist should be an integral part of the process, not an afterthought, not something we get into when we run into problem from maybe haphazard kind of solutions that we come up with momentarily that wouldn't see the light of the day, or wouldn't be sustainable, or wouldn't even meet the essence, you know, for which it is designed.
All right, Ephraim, you know how this thing works. I don't know if I should say in Nigeria, where many people in political, in public offices, they just want to make a name for themselves. You know, when I was during my administration, I did this. We started this. You know, we were the pioneer of this and that. You know, maybe this is just one of the things playing out right now without proper planning and considering, you know, the state of these students in question. But away from that, Ephraim, let's also look at the security aspect of it. You made mention of JAM, you know, setting these things from, setting one of the exams from 6:30 a.m., you know, without considering the implications of such an early time of the day. Now, if we are having things like this in rural areas, you know, what's this? Let's look at the safety. How safe are these areas in rural areas where we have these computers? Will there be generators? And what security do they have to guard these things? Just like we have in the case of, you know, elections, where you hear centers being, you know, bundled away, with some of the equipment they have been stolen and broke in and what have you. These areas, we are talking about computers, numbers of computers. How safe are these areas for people to go in to have these exams?
Okay, so basically, depending on the community that it's involved, but we know that some communities are more volatile than the others, and also, like, apart from being educationally less developed, you also talk about inadequate, poor, or lack of even the necessary infrastructure to be able to run like a complex exam process, like deployment of the CBT. So I think I would want to join your call and some other concern Nigeria on the need for Waec, which they are considering that, and which they already see in Nigeria, meeting up with those developed nations only in examination. I think they should actually give time, right? To be able to plan adequately. If you want to do development, it should be all encompassing. This idea of like you want to be like UK, you want to be like US, without actually, having the needed infrastructure that UK needs, had to put in place to get those things rolling, does not really make it sustainable, right? These are things we've all seen where someone like our leaders, like when Mr. President took the decision of the policy of the removal of subsidy, and he was asked, he began to reference nations that have taken such similar moves, But one of the things he failed to realize and to recognize and even to identify is the stature, you know, the level of development that those nations were able to attain before even contemplating a very dicey policy like that would have thrown the nation, and people into greater hardship. And as that is happening, guess what? You still have some political gladiators and pundits who will tell you that Nigerians, against the realities that we face, has had the best time. Like I saw someone post on one of the social media platforms that Nigerians or Saudis under Tinubu has in 2 years enjoyed what they did not enjoy in the 6 years of Jonathan. I'm like, come on, what is this person actually trying to say, right? I was trying to wrap my head around that, and I was wondering, could it be that this young Nigerian is probably not facing what some of us are facing? But the interesting thing is, from experience, is it appears that hardship sometimes could shift people's thinking, right? It could cause mutation in the brain. Because over time, when you see some of those persons that keep defending bad leadership, and you tell them, okay, send your account number, let me roger you 5K. People who were insulting you for speaking to the truth will begin to call you boss. Boss, please, I will send you account number. I see the heart. God bless you for me, Baba. Things like that. This is what you begin to see. And that really calls for deeper thinking that, perhaps neuroscientists need to undertake a study to find out the impact of abject hardship on a possible mutating the brain function, right? I can tell you because typically I keep wondering why people that suffer the most in Nigeria are people that defend bad leadership. I can tell you that as a civic leader who's been out there advocating for people, and oftentimes you might be seen as an enemy of government because even those you claim to advocate for will not come for you when the same government, decide to like reward you frontally, for coming against their policies. And that's why I think there is really a problem.
All right, Ephraim. Let's look at the fairness of this exam to every other. I'm talking about people with disability. How are they going to cope, knowing that this is now a CBT form of exam?
Well, I think as far as for those maybe that has a disability, so depending on the type, right? So maybe here what we'll be talking about mainly those that are visually impaired, right? Or maybe can't hear. Either ways, right? Or maybe if it's somebody that probably just have an issue with a limb, if you can hear well and see, and then it's even better off, right? But maybe if your hands is affected, perhaps incorporating also a situation where people can use like headsets and speak to the system, what's their choice of answer. Maybe audioly powered systems to choose your answer would be reasonably advised. Now we know for the visually impaired, right? They will need like some auditory components, to read out for them. So I think there's already so many tech breakthroughs and applications that the CBT administrators just need to factor into their system. It's not going to be a novel one. There's already numerous solutions designed to ensure inclusion for those that are physically challenged, as long as education is concerned.
All right, so Ephraim, do you think this is going to be a shock to some students, regarding the urgency of this, even if it's next year? Do you see students, getting to adjust to this in no time? Do you even see the possibility of students coming to do well without having any setback during this exam, CBT-wise, next year?
It's going to be a challenge, and of course, before you talk about the ease at which students could adjust, the greater question would be the ease at which institutions will make the necessary adjustment to prepare their students. And it's not an easy one because education sector is highly capital intensive. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, if you're talking about private sectors, government don't give subvention. Rather, they land you with heavy taxes, which is not proper. And then for those in the government sector, oftentimes it is poorly funded. And so where is the help of students going to come from if the institution, which is a vehicle on which all of them is boarded, to their destination, the vehicle, the tires are not good, or the engine not working so well. So if you're talking about this change is going to start at the institutional level, and then from there it's going to translate to the individual level of the students.
All right then. So cases whereby with JAMB we see mass failure, something that happened this year. JAMB had to come out and apologize to the candidates that sat for the exam. And every other time we keep seeing situations where JAMB will come out and say there was mass failure this particular year. What lessons should Waec and Neco and every other computer-based test learn from the failures of JAMB?
Well, I think what I could tell you, there is really nothing, any lesson they will learn as long as Nigeria is concerned. And you are wondering why I'm saying this. We live in a nation without consequences, right? A JAMB registrar gambles with the future of children, leading even to the loss of one life, and comes up and all he could say is, man proposes, God disposes, and he's still there as JAMB registrar talking rubbish. If it's in nations that, serious nations, the first thing that will happen would be that he's going to lose the job. Secondly, there's going to be like a launch of full-scale investigation that will land him in prison for toiling with the future of children. But everything for us is politics. Everything for us is excuses. Everything for us is trying to use religion to justify inefficiencies. And for as long as we continue that way, there isn't any deterrent anywhere that will stop anyone from treading that path of least resistance if they don't see any commensurate, weighty, and deserving consequences. So if we ever want to get to a point where people can sit back, and even before they launch a full-scale attempt and trial, they must have first of all evaluated their chances of succeeding. If we want to get to that point, then we must first begin to be a nation that have consequences. You do the time, you do the crime. You do the crime, you do the time.
Okay, Ephraim, thank you so much. This is really a good one, we must say. Waec going into CBT, computer-based test, it's really an applaudable one, right? So it doesn't look like it's a bad thing. It's really a good thing. But just that so many people expect that before you come up with something like this, the people is like giving someone a quick notice, let them know and put themselves together before taking such responsibilities. But then again, let's look at it from the angle of the teachers, the people that will be taking the students through this process. Will they also be trained? Are there any manpower or training or whatever put in place for these people? Or is it just going to be wake up one day and then see computers and maybe generators, situated somewhere for students to come in and have their exams?
Well, I think it's left also for the policymakers, because what we're actually talking about here is what it should be versus what it is, right? So what it should be would be that Waec would have factored in all of this and come up with a template. But what it is that all of those things, I can assure you, probably was not factored in. And what will be left with at the end of the day is the resultant impact, you know, on the already dicey exams with a lot of pitfalls. I think the first thing advice for Waec would be, let them stop leaking their own papers. Let them deal with the enemies within. You can't be talking about student malpractice if there are malpractices from your officials, which is the greater one. If one student cheats, it is one student. If one Waec officer leak paper, it is the entire nation that is infested by that mistake. So Waec has more critical things to focus on, than what they are currently prioritizing. I just see most of these activities as just let's get busy talking. Once in a while, the nation is silent and somebody will wake up and say, henceforth, if you are not up to 16, you can't write Waec. We start debating, all of those things. Let them just sit back, evaluate Nigeria as it is, develop templates that will serve our interest currently as a nation, not futuristic. Focus on the now. Because what we call future is all about possessing your now. And then with that, you can now grow. And, if you are getting into a thing, you are sure that you are going into the being qualified. Huh?
Okay, but then Ephraim, from your own point of view, would you say this is a wrong timing for Waec and Neco to come up with this? Or do you think, just like the opinion of others, they would say there's no better time to start this? If you have to start, then now is the right time. What's your opinion?
It's, the latter position you took sounds more like a motivational talk. There's no better time to see, my dear. There's always the right time, right, to do a thing. You are talking about moving your processes from analog to digital. If you can't do the analog well, trust me, the digital will be disastrous, right? We have like some systemic issues, and systems has to do with humans. That's why even till now, when some of these challenges come up, a human being will come and say technical glitches. Technical glitches was like the same kind of lame excuse. When students, maybe those that schooled when people like us school, there's one mistake some students who are not detailed or some excuses they used to give. You ask someone why there is a mistake in his project, he will say graphical error. Typographical error means you are typing the right thing and then your system is writing another thing, right? My dear, is there anything like that? Is it not garbage in, garbage out? So, technical glitches, you can't hear such kind of lame excuses in nations that are serious. When somebody blow that big grammar, people will begin to clap and say, hey, yeah. Especially when the person now add God Almighty or Allah and say Allah proposes and, or man proposes and Allah disposes. You've gotten Nigerian society, right? Once you give big excuse, but there is really nothing like that. What oftentimes you have is failures of humans. And why that failure will always continue is because there are no consequences. The so-called tech company that was contracted and the software they're supposed to renew for a whole clusters, right? The KAD clusters and the LAC clusters that were supposed to be, renewed for an entire range of states was allegedly not done. And you can be sure next year if you check Jam profile, they still awarded that their fellow gentlemen the contract to keep on, enjoying, and then why they get their kickbacks. Supposing the Jam registrar, as we speak, is having it hot, the new Jam registrar will not even contemplate that company because he knows as he's there to serve. If he doesn't do well, 1 year after, when he's assessed, he could be chilling in the prison, right? This is what happened in Syria. I mean, if we begin to have consequences as a nation, people will sit up. Don't think sitting up is a given. No, it doesn't, right? When you go to nations that there are strict compliance with laws, anything you do, you see it immediately. You jump traffic, they will bring the bill for you in the house, right? Hey, it will be posted to you. You have to pay everything, compliance, right? You harass somebody, you just get the full weight of the law. But when it's everybody behave the way they like and there are no consequences, people will be incentivized to continue doing it the old way. And that's our problem, if you ask me, as a nation. Our principal problem is not because we don't have laws, but we have laws, but no consequences. Someone will finish as a governor, all of a sudden they say, oh, he took so money, EFCC will parade the person. The next thing, a lawbreaker is now in the hollow chamber of National Assembly making laws for people who are far better than him or her, right? Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. I mean, in nations where there are consequences, even the very fact that you didn't even commit the crime, just the fact that there is that appearance of a criminal, you want to recuse yourself from that position to say, let me even clear my name first before coming to run for this position. But the person will come there from a lawbreaker to a lawmaker. What an interesting narrative. From Saul to Paul.
All right, Ephraim, thank you so much for joining us tonight. That's the most we can have on this particular conversation. But just before we sign off, in a nutshell, what is your advice to the federal government of this particular development? In a nutshell.
Well, what I would say to the federal government is invest more into education, right? Invest more into processes, invest more into the welfare of the teachers, invest more into facilities. Let's invest more into giving children the much needed experiences. And then we can also begin to have better outcomes in terms of what they churn out during examination. A situation where what we are all after is what are they going to do during the exam period? It's just like buying more and more tankers, right? To secure a nation, but you don't make any effort in terms of job security, food security. Meanwhile, nations that are able to contain insecurity the more go on the approach of what we call human security, as against kinetics, the use of force. Provide them with food, provide the unemployed with money, incentivize the employed, right? Create an enabling environment for everyone to thrive, and with that you are going to have less crime. But in Nigeria, buy more arms, give them more arms, a situation where like a police officer will carry a high rifle in the hand and is hungry. What will he do? He will convert that tool into a tool of oppression and start collecting money from the same people he's meant to protect. If we begin to reject things and realize that everything is not about force, right? There are ways to do things and you get the right outcomes. That is the moment we can begin to achieve the right results as a nation. I think for now it's all about, someone will live in his own ideal space and then come up with policies and say, we know this is going to work. We know once we introduce this, malpractice is going to stop. And the next thing now, you might even begin to see even Waec hack their own systems. Like we don't really know what happened that made their result to go out for some hours, right? Claiming it's the technical glitches. How about if it's somebody within jeopardizing the examination itself? We don't know, right? So Waec should be able to do some level of introspection.
All right, Ephraim, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us tonight on Signature Evening.
Thank you for joining us.
You're most welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, we'll go on a short break, and when we return, we'll have news and events. To stay with us.
We are local.
The international community is observing every
Why the main market is in chaos. People are
We are national.
Those in support of this motion as amended, say aye.
We have taken it by default.
We are international.
Israeli airstrikes.
Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment.
Signature TV, news in your pocket.
Welcome back. Now the news and event segment where we take a look at some of the reports carried on right here at Signature TV. Abuja residents react to the emergence of ADC as opposition platform for 2027.
And we have native doctor and suspected ritualist arraigned in Enugu Magistrates Court.
And for football fans, football communities react to the death of Diago Jota and Peter Rufai.
And also the media charged to promote inclusivity and disabilities' rights in voting.
And finally, reactions trailed rumored defection of Governor Mba to APC. Coming up also after all of this is Political Circle. Please stay with us.